Is Disney a very religious company today? The answer might surprise you. Let's look at this question, find out what it means, and even answer it. Welcome to the Timotheus Academy. I am the instructor for Timotheus Academy, Timothy Brown. I hope this content brings incredible value to you. If you feel it is bringing value to you, please like the video and subscribe to this channel. It would be very helpful to us if you would do so. And it would also help us bring you more value in the future, even through perhaps additional content. Now, back to the topic at hand. Is Disney a very religious company today? What do I mean by this? What is the correct answer to this question? And why does it matter, not just to you, but in general? We read in the book of the Acts of the Apostles from the Bible that the Apostle Paul went to Athens. In chapter 17, verse 16, we read that Paul's spirit was provoked within him as he saw the Athenian idols. In verse 19, Paul is brought to the Areopagus, and in verse 23, he declares to the men of Athens that he perceived that they were most religious in every way, as he had passed their objects of worship as he had passed along. There could be no doubt that the Athenians were then very religious. And by that I mean they were committed to some specific religious elements, which could be plainly seen by the idols they had included all over Athens. But while the Athenians were very religious, they were committed to nothing Christian. In fact, they were very much committed to that which was non-Christian, and even very much committed to that which contradicted Christianity, which ultimately was harmful to them. It was harmful for them to do this. What I mean to ask is the following. In an age when most corporations want to have nothing religious in their operations for fear of offending and losing money in the process, does the company Walt Disney actually incorporate many religious elements in their entertainment content and incorporate these in their amusement parks as well? The answer to this must be an overwhelming yes. We will see in this content that Disney does this very thing, without a doubt, and based on this can be labeled a very religious company. And it matters, generally and to you specifically. In recent years, many major Disney films have had some element of religion in them. This is most unusual today if one thinks about it. Matters regarding religion tend to divide, cause divisions, as some religions believe trees have spirits, but some people say this is false. Some religions believe man has a spirit animal, but some people believe this is false. And so corporations tend not to publicly commit significant resources to matters that regard religion, as they don't want to alienate huge portions of the population in doing so. One exemption to this may be the company Aveda, which puts forth explicitly Hindu ideas in their marketing. But one does not go to Home Depot and see a large number of products there promoting religious matters, such as Viking god paint or New Age drills or any such thing. You would think that was unusual. One does not go to Bank of America and see the products there promoting religious things either, or including religious elements, such as accounts that are based on praying to dead ancestors or mortgages that concern the worship of the sun. That would be strange, unusual, but this is exactly what Disney does. Yes, they do it through narrative content, but that's only how they incorporate many religious elements in their entertainment content and in their amusement parks. They choose to insert it in their films and parks in an indirect way, but the way they insert it absolutely normalizes it, tacitly approves of it, and actually promotes it. And this is most unusual today, if one thinks about it. But to ask a follow-up question, in their incorporation of many things that are religious in nature, in their entertainment content, and in their amusement parks, does Disney incorporate Christianity in its films and parks? To the great extent that Christianity has influenced and shaped Western society and America itself. You might say, what do you mean? Stated in another way, if Disney is going to be unlike almost every other corporation and lean into religious things and elements very hard, do they do this most of all with Christianity, given that Christianity has been by far the most impactful influence on the Western world without any doubt? The answer is no. Disney does not do this. Okay, well then, does Disney then incorporate Christianity in its films and parks, at least then as much as it does other religions, which have not influenced and shaped the West and America itself? The answer is no. Well then, does Disney incorporate Christianity into its films and parks in a clear and recognizable way, giving Christianity's influence and shaping of the West and America? No, it doesn't seem to really incorporate Christianity at all. While Disney goes to great lengths to present all sorts of things that are religious in nature, an element of religion in its films and parks, one really has to try hard to find any mention of Christianity in the films and parks at all. If we again pretend that Home Depot does name its products after religions and elements, again, Viking god paint, New Age drills, we would then expect to be able to go into Home Depot and find some products that are named after Christianity. But then we look and look and look and finally ask someone to help us, only to be told by them that they're just a vendor. They're just supplying. They don't actually work at Home Depot. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen something like that. If Home Depot was doing this like Disney was doing it, sure, we might eventually find something there associated with Christianity, but it would be pretty difficult to do. Maybe it's old, maybe it's in the back, mislabeled, it's in the wrong place, if we could find it at all. Meaning that Disney isn't merely incorporating many things that are religious in nature in their entertainment content and in their amusement parks. Disney isn't merely doing this with an odd emphasis on religions other than Christianity. But Disney is actually presenting religious elements in their films and parks that contradict what Christianity teaches and contradict Christianity's teachings, and presenting these in a way that normalizes them, even approves of them, and I dare say even promotes them. And, now stay with me here, by normalizing and approving and promoting teachings that contradict Christianity, Disney is actually disagreeing with Christianity's teachings and promoting that disagreement. Like approving of a light in a room being turned off is by default to disagree with it being turned on. Disney is actually trying to present what they believe are religious winners and losers in their entertainment. And they are presenting that they have judged Christianity to be the loser. One might say that Disney can do whatever it wants, meaning it is under no compulsion to present elements of the Christian religion in its films. To which I would respond, I never said otherwise. I don't believe that Disney needs to take the place of the church. I'm not looking to Disney to present the glorious gospel of Jesus to the world as their main business model. I'm not crying in my coffee because Disney isn't presenting Christian elements to the same degree that it's presenting perhaps Islamic or Hindu or animistic elements or any other elements. One might say that Disney can do whatever it wants. They might say that Disney is under no compulsion to not present elements of non-Christian religion in its films, elements contrary to Christianity, in a way that approves of them. But whether Disney can do what it wants is different than whether Disney should do this. I would strongly argue, and I believe I could do it successfully, that it is reasonable to conclude that Christianity is in fact true. And to approve of and promote the opposite of what Christianity teaches as true is then to approve of and promote what is false. And to approve of and promote something that is false is wrong. It should not be done. You say, well, it's your opinion that Christianity is true, but others may hold that their religion is true. So you cannot say you are right and others are wrong. Well, that's absurd. That's confused. And it's not reflective of what I am claiming at all. Someone that said that to me would be saying that they were right and I was wrong. I am claiming that Christianity is true regardless of my opinion or anyone else's, and that Christianity can be argued to be true in a rational way, and that if something simply contradicts Christianity, it is false. You may disagree with this, but I believe it can be demonstrated by argument, mostly by men smarter than myself, though. Disney is a company, and they can make decisions that brings them revenue. But Disney doesn't base every decision it makes on what will and won't bring them revenue. It's making decisions today that are not motivated by profit. Disney seems to be making decisions today that are not in the interest of their shareholders. Their stock price and the top line of their balance sheet reflects that. That's not the point of this content, but it's clear that they are motivated by things other than profit. Disney is not, though, a faceless bureaucracy. It is made of people who make decisions. They do have a profit motive, but they also seem to have another motive. They do want to bring in revenue, but they are making decisions that don't bring in revenue. But regardless of how much money a decision might make, every decision cannot be based only on whether it will make money. Disney does have a moral responsibility not to promote ideas that are false, as this will inhibit the flourishing of those who view the films, when the viewer invariably will begin to emulate the behavior. Disney is under an obligation to present things in their films that should be emulated, present things in their films that are true and should be followed. And when Disney presents the opposite of Christianity, Disney is causing their viewers to not live according to the truth. Now you might say, humbug. People don't emulate what they see on the screen. Really? Well, what would you say if you understood that Disney disagrees with you? Disney itself believes that just because the characters in their films do something, their viewers will conclude that the activity they see on the screen is normal or good or even perhaps approved of. Before many of the Disney films that display the use of tobacco, Disney has a special preview they show that warns of the dangers of tobacco use. And on Disney Plus, they have a verbal warning that the film contains depictions of tobacco use. They even indicate that those who use tobacco should have a guilty conscience. And they even have a website for quitting smoking. Why? Why does Disney go to extreme lengths to point out that just because tobacco is used in 101 Dalmatians and Peter Pan, the viewer should not think that they should use tobacco themselves? Obviously, because Disney knows precisely that because the characters in their films do something, their viewers will conclude that the activity they see on the screen is normal, good, or approved of. And obviously, Disney is opposed to their viewers using tobacco because they go to extreme lengths to point out that the viewer should not use tobacco, even though they see it used in the film. Disney has thus conceded that when the characters in their films do something, their viewers will conclude that the activity they see on the screen is normal, good, or approved of. But Disney does not indicate any warning before Mulan that the viewer should not pray to their ancestors. There's no mention of a guilty conscience because of this. There's no website trying to get people to not do that. Disney does not indicate any warning before Pocahontas that the viewer should not believe in animism. There's no mention of a guilty conscience because of this. No website saying that rocks don't have spirits. Why? Because Disney is a very religious company after all, committed to some specific religious elements that contradict Christianity in some way, while certainly not being committed to elements that are consistent with Christianity in some way. Disney doesn't believe that praying to ancestors and treating rocks like they have a spirit is wrong. Disney thinks these are normal and good and approved of and presents them as such. Disney knows that they are presenting these as normal and good and approved of, and so Disney doesn't think people who do this should quit. If they did think that, they would have put a warning. They would have put a disclaimer. Disney knows the viewers of their films will emulate the actions they see on the screen. They present things such as praying to ancestors, rocks having spirits, visiting the dead, so on and so forth. And if one emulates these beliefs, they will inhibit their own flourishing, and it will be harmful to them. And Disney does this. Disney does this to such a degree, it is really unlike almost any other secular company. And should Home Depot or Bank of America begin to do what Disney is doing, presenting products that are so religious yet non-Christian, it would be shocking to consumers. Yet for some reason, it's just viewed as normal at Disney. Could we imagine Apple doing this? Imagine Ford doing this? Imagine Electrolux doing this? Now you might say, hypothetically, those are very different kinds of companies. Disney is in the business of entertainment. Well, imagine Universal Studios doing this. They don't seem to be. And I hope to open your eyes to this here in this content. Let's first look at examples of Disney doing what I am indicating in the films, followed by examples of Disney doing this in the amusement parks. Now, before I get started, 3 things need to be established. First, if at any point during this content you begin to think that I am simply a curmudgeon or a fuddy-duddy, I simply am taking exception with Disney, I'm just anti-Disney, or you begin to think I'm a legalist or a fundamentalist who thinks wearing blue jeans is evil, watching TV is wrong, or something like this, you would be mistaken. And you would have missed the point entirely. I might say, rewind this, go back and watch it again. You might say, well, I missed the point because you didn't make it clear. So let me again, very specifically, make the point. Disney regularly presents content in its films and parks which contains elements explicitly contradicting Christianity, and does so in such a way as to normalize it and tacitly approve of it, even promote it. And by so doing, a reasonable person would understand they indicate that religions other than Christianity are normal and good and being approved of, and that Christianity, which cannot be harmonized with these religions, is neither normal nor good nor approved of. Because Disney communicates its values through its products, its film content, its park content. Disney is teaching millions of people every year what to value, and those that learn the lesson and live it out are being inhibited from flourishing. Second, I am only going to give a limited number of examples of what I am talking about. It probably will be the case that as I speak, you can think of a Disney film or an element in the park that makes the point I am making, but I don't mention. That's fine. My point here is not to provide a survey of Disney, but to give examples of my claim. But don't get all out of sorts if I don't mention a film or element in the park that is another example of the point I am trying to make. I appreciate your patience with me beforehand. Third, it is probably the case that you can think of a Disney film or show that actually is an example of the opposite of what I am claiming and disproves what I am claiming. You may be able to think of a Disney film that does not speak of something religious at all, like WALL-E, Cars, Monsters Incorporated, early Pixar films really didn't do, and that's fine. You may also be able to think of a Disney film that does mention something seemingly Christian, like the scriptures being mentioned in the animated Robin Hood film, or Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl being married in a church with the minister holding a Bible. Fantasia 2000 features a reinterpretation of Noah's Ark to Elgar's Pomp and Circumstance, though Noah's assistant is Donald Duck. But understand that I am not aware of every moment of every Disney film, and every nook and every cranny of every Disney park, and that one Disney film that doesn't support my contention, or one element of a Disney park that doesn't support my contention, doesn't disprove my contention. If you think that I am wrong, that's fine. If you think this is much ado about nothing, that's okay. I think it's an important topic. I think it's worthy of your consideration, which is why I am putting it together for you to consider here. Regarding the films, or rather the evidence for what I am mentioning appearing in the films, we seem to see a clear evolution of Disney being religious in its films. But Disney's behavior is by no means only understood chronologically, meaning this doesn't only occur in the most recent films. If we begin to look at the film Pocahontas, the website d23.com indicates the following about it. The adventurous young Native American woman, Pocahontas, along with her constant companions, Meeko, a raccoon, and Flit, a hummingbird, visit Grandmother Willow, a counseling tree spirit, because she is uncertain about the path her life should take. End quote. In the film, nature is indicated as having spiritual elements, which is animism. Some people really believe this. This religious belief is roughly described as Pocahontas sings a song where she claims, quote, "Every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name." This is what is presented in the film, not as false, misleading, and dangerous, but as normal and even as good. The animism doesn't really add to the plot, so it's gratuitous. If it was taken away, nothing would change. Disney didn't have to include it in the film. It goes far beyond ordinary make-believe, but Disney chose to do so. And if we are careful in our thinking, we can intellectually separate Pocahontas or her people from what they are presented as believing and practicing. But the children viewing the film aren't careful in their thinking, and it's perfectly reasonable to assume that those who viewed the film and thought well of Pocahontas or her people in some way would uncritically accept their animism as normal, since the film presents it as normal. And so we have an example of Disney including something of a spiritual nature in the film, specifically something that is contrary to Christianity, and doing so in such a way that it is normalized, good even. And as a consequence, Disney is giving the impression that Christianity is not normal or good, because animism is contrary, it contradicts Christianity. We look now to Mulan. The website D23.com indicates, brought to life by Mulan's extraordinary actions, a feisty, flim-flam guardian dragon, Mushu, joins the heroine's quest and leads her into a series of comic misadventures, end quote. What is not indicated is that Mulan's family practices the veneration of the ancestors, prays to the ancestors, and the ancestors come to life and converse with one another. Like animism, this is a belief that is held in some religions, and so Disney is presenting these beliefs in these films intentionally. The veneration of and prayer to ancestors doesn't really add to the plot, and so it's gratuitous. Disney didn't have to include it in the film. It goes far beyond ordinary make-believe, but they chose to do so, and to do so in a way that normalizes it. If we are careful in our thinking, we can intellectually separate Mulan and her people from what they believe and practice, but the children viewing the film aren't careful in their thinking. Most adults aren't either. Again, it's perfectly reasonable to assume that those who viewed the film and thought well of Mulan or her people in some way would uncritically accept their veneration of and prayer to ancestors as normal, since the film presents it as normal. And so we have an example of Disney including something of a spiritual nature in the film, specifically something that is contrary to Christianity, and doing so in such a way as it is normalized, good even, in how it's presented. And as a consequence, it would give the impression that Christianity is neither normal nor good, since Christianity contradicts what is being presented. We look now to Moana. D23.com describes the following. An adventurous teenager, Moana, sails out on a daring mission to save her people. During her journey, she meets the once mighty demigod, Maui, who guides her in her quest to become a master wayfinder. A what? A demigod, who is a main character in the film and even has a solo number in which he tells Moana she is welcome for all sorts of things, including his creation of the earth. The film Moana is also full of animism, like the film Mulan, and Moana's dead grandmother is somehow represented by a stingray that is swimming in the ocean. Disney didn't have to include a demigod in the film, but they chose to do so, and in a way that tacitly approves of him. This goes far beyond make-believe. Why was all this included in the film? The film could have easily been made without these elements, so they are gratuitous, but a choice was made to include them in the film. If we are careful in our thinking, we can separate intellectually Moana or her people from what it is presented that they believe and practice. Veneration of spirits, animism. Also, we see this demigod. We may suspend belief long enough to say, this isn't real. Demigods are false, but children don't do this. And many adults don't either. Many who are viewing the film aren't critical in their thinking. And it's perfectly reasonable to assume that they would leave thinking that what is presented in Moana is good, is tacitly approved of, and as even being promoted. And that is exactly, my contention, what does occur. So we have another example of Disney including something religious in nature in the film, specifically something that is contrary to, that contradicts Christianity. and does so in a way that normalizes it, approves of it, and even as a consequence gives the impression that Christianity is neither normal or good. What about the film Onward? Again, D23.com, the website describes Ian Lightfoot, an introverted teenage elf, lost his father before he was born, and on his 16th birthday finds himself wanting to become better and bolder, more like his dad. His mother, Laurel, surprises him and his older brother, Barley, with a magical gift from their late father that, if conjured properly, will give the brothers one more day with their dad. The spell goes awry, so the Lightfoot brothers embark on an extraordinary quest aboard Barley's van, Guinevere, to discover if there might be a little magic left in the world. But what really happens is the boy's father, after he had died, magic is used to bring him back for one day, but only half of him. And so from his waist down he comes back, but the rest of his body is not there. You say, what? Exactly. This needs no analysis, and really defies analysis. It, though, is clearly religious in nature in the film, specifically something that is contrary to Christianity is what it is. And as it's presented in such a way, it is normalized and even approved of. As a consequence, it gives the impression that Christianity is neither normal nor good because it contradicts Christianity. We turn to Coco. D23.com describes, desperate to prove his talent, Miguel finds himself in the stunning, colorful land of the dead, following a mysterious chain of events. Along the way, he meets a charming trickster, Hector, and together they set off on an extraordinary journey to unlock the real story behind Miguel's family history, end quote. The film centers around the observance of what is known as the Day of the Dead in some cultures. My personal encounter with this observance is only being part of a class that was lectured in college by a teacher about how we Americans were wrong to find anything uncomfortable with what she had described the observance of this Day of the Dead was. Though nearly no one in the class had expressed anything about it, the whole class was lectured. And though we were told we could pass no judgment on anything someone else practiced, we were judged extremely harshly. But what is the Day of the Dead? The website History.com records the following in an entry on the Day of the Dead traditions by Ivan Roman. And I quote, "The Day of the Dead, or Dia de los Muertos, is an ever-evolving holiday that traces its earliest roots to the Aztec people. In what is now central Mexico, the Aztecs used skulls to honor the dead a millennium before the Day of the Dead celebrations emerged. Skulls, like the ones once placed on the Aztec temples, remain a key symbol in a tradition that has continued for more than 6 centuries in the annual celebration to honor and commune with those who have passed on." End quote. Commune with those passed on? Commune with the dead? This observance has come to modern people from the religion of the Aztecs. It relies heavily on skulls for its observance, because the Aztecs used these on their temples. Aztec temples? What about that? The website History.com records the following in an entry on the Aztecs by the editors. The Aztec faith shared many aspects with other Mesoamerican religions, like that of the Maya, notably including the rite of human sacrifice in the great cities of the Aztec Empire. Magnificent temples, palaces, plazas, and statues embodied the civilization's unfailing devotion to the many Aztec gods. So it seems Disney made a film based on the Day of the Dead observance, which is an observance in some cultures that comes from the Aztec religion, which accounts for the reason that skulls are featured very prominently in decorations for this observance, as these were featured prominently on Aztec temples. These Aztec worshiped many false gods in ways that included the sacrificing of human beings. Now, someone may at this point respond, well, sure, the whole thing sounds really unusual when you say it like that. When you put it all together like that, it is kind of unusual. But how else should it be laid out? Disney has created a product that aligns itself with what has just here been described, and by so doing has aligned itself not only with the modern notions of the Day of the Dead, whatever those might be, but also with the origins of the Day of the Dead observance. How would someone react if Home Depot suddenly put a product like this on its shelves, or Bank of America offered mortgages like this? Clearly, what Disney has done is built the film Coco upon something that is completely religious. And not just religious, but religious in a way that is contradicts Christianity. And doing so in such a way that is normalized or even approved of. And as a consequence, given the impression that Christianity is neither normal or good. Well, what about Frozen? I'm going to step on some of your toes here. Frozen 2, where the elements of the earth are said to have or be spirits. These spirit elements are angered by the actions from the past. They must be appeased because they are wreaking havoc on the village. Elsa being contacted somehow by her dead mother, and Elsa visiting an island where she believes she has been led to by her mother's calling, which seems to be a completely different plot line, but there it is. The animism, the ancestor communication, even Elsa's powers are somehow extraneous to the plot. They're not really the point. But Disney made the entire movie based on these, and they go far beyond ordinary and make-believe. And if we are careful in our thinking, we can notice that even in Frozen 1, the townspeople are shocked and uncomfortable with Elsa and what's going on in her life. In Frozen 2, they are shocked and uncomfortable with the spirits attacking them and all these things. Yet eventually, though, they get used to the whole thing. But is that what happens to the audience? What of the audience? The children viewing the film aren't careful in their thinking. It's perfectly reasonable to assume that those who viewed the film and thought well of Elsa and Anna would uncritically accept their animism as normal, since the film presents it as normal. And even the film presents the townspeople as eventually accepting it. Isn't that what the audience would do? Again, this and many other things we have discussed are not mere make-believe, nor are they mistakes. But Disney is making claims about the world. And so we have an example, again, of Disney including something of a spiritual nature in their films, specifically something that is contrary to Christianity, and doing so in such a way that it is normalized. It is presented as good even. And as a consequence, Disney gives the impression that Christianity is neither normal nor good, because these elements are contradicted by Christianity. Now, we don't have time to discuss films such as Soul or Encanto. These are examples of the same. Examples of Disney presenting non-Christian religious content or religious content that is contradicting Christianity, and doing so in a way that normalizes it, tacitly approves of it, and even promotes it. Regarding the films, or rather the evidence for what I am mentioning appearing in the films, we seem to see that Disney is clearly doing this. But what about the theme parks? Let me briefly mention two examples of this in the parks. The first is in Epcot Center, in the World Showcase, in the country of Mexico, or where Mexico is presented. There is a building that houses what is supposed to be Mexican culture. The building itself appears in every way to be a replica of an Aztec temple. And while this did not used to be the case, now because of the movie Coco, almost the entire area where Mexican culture is supposed to be highlighted is now devoted to the Day of the Dead and skeletons and skulls. This is because of the fact that the Day of the Dead is presented overwhelmingly as being something largely reflective of all of Mexico. Now, I cannot speak for Mexican culture personally, but it would seem to be the case that the overwhelming majority of what is unique about Mexico is something other than the Day of the Dead. Is this the only thing that occurs in Mexico? Absolutely not. Yet why does it take up nearly the entire common area of Mexico in Epcot Center's World Showcase? It seems extremely disproportionate. There's even a plaque inside of this replica of an Aztec temple that highlights the fact that the Day of the Dead does not find its origins in Mexican history, but in the religions that occupied the area far earlier, which is what we discussed previously. But Disney has made a decision to again combine the Day of the Dead and an Aztec temple replica, and to overwhelmingly promote the Day of the Dead in this replica of an Aztec temple, presenting it in an overwhelming way to anyone who should enter the building. It seems extremely unusual they would do this, considering all that has been discussed previously, but they do this, and it is unusual. I can't imagine this is being driven by market forces, right? It doesn't seem like many people make their pilgrimage to Epcot Center to peruse a huge gift shop full of skulls and skeletons. Yet the fact that these are presented as they are normalizes them and promotes them to visitors. Another example of what I'm indicating is the Stave Church. In this World Showcase at Epcot Center, there is a replica of a stave church. These kinds of churches are presented as being significant in the Norwegian region, very important. And at one point in the past, this replica served as a kind of museum highlighting these kinds of churches in the Norwegian region, filled with all sorts of facts and information about stave churches in the area. If you are so inclined, you can actually go on YouTube and find some old videos which feature the museum and what it had. Obviously, by the fact that I said what I just said, you are able to understand there is no longer a museum highlighting these kinds of churches inside of the replica of a stave church. No, at this point, there is instead a museum that has replaced it, that highlights the false gods and goddesses of the old pagan Viking religion. Yes, you heard that correctly. That inside of a replica of a church, a museum regarding churches has been removed, and at this point replaced with a museum dedicated to false gods of a pagan religion. One might hypothesize, well, perhaps the Museum of Norwegian Churches did not get a lot of traffic, which is why it was replaced. But I might contend it was replaced with a museum featuring Viking gods and goddesses. Will this get a lot of traffic? It is not simply the fact that the church museum did not get a whole lot of traffic, and so it was replaced with a roller coaster which did get a lot of traffic. What has replaced the Museum of the Norwegian Churches is a museum of religious matters that are entirely contradictory to the Christian religion. Yet inside of a replica of an old Norwegian church is now a museum for pagan gods. This is even more absurd given the history of the Vikings abandoning their paganism and converting to Christianity themselves. We read from the article, Vikings from Pagans to Christians, How Did It Happen? From historyonthenet.com, the following, and I quote, "At first the Viking Norse didn't take to Christianity. They loved their own gods and were content with them. English and Frankish Christian priests and monks had begun missionary tours to the Viking lands from the 700s to 800s. However, the conversion of the Vikings took place over centuries. Even when a Danish or Swedish king became Christian and proclaimed his people were Christian, many still practiced their pagan ways and held to the old gods. By the end of the Viking Age, however, most Vikings had become fully Christian and were baptized and buried in that faith." End quote. Not only is it the case that it is rather absurd to convert a museum that is devoted to churches inside of a replica of a church to a museum devoted to pagan gods and goddesses of the Vikings, it is also something that is the opposite of what occurred in the lives of the Vikings themselves. It is absurd historically as well. Well, one might again hypothesize, Disney simply doesn't want to promote religion, really, by having a museum devoted to churches on their property. But I might point out, having a museum of churches on the property of Disney is not promoting religion, as much as it's promoting the incredible historic architecture and influence that churches in the area occupied. And two, if you search on the internet, you will find it is confirmed that right across the lake from this replica of a church, in the area devoted to Morocco, is a functional prayer room for those of the Muslim religion. And so you have a situation where a museum describing Norwegian churches, which is actually in a replica of a Norwegian church, now houses a museum for pagan gods and goddesses that contradicts Christianity. While across the lake, you have a building then that does not appear to be a replica of a mosque, but is in fact simply supposed to be a representation of the architecture of Morocco, but now a functioning prayer room has been constructed inside of this. Without any doubt whatsoever, one can see that elements of the Christian religion are not merely being presented, but actually being removed from Epcot Center, which is not the case with other religions in the Disney parks, as efforts are being made for them to be introduced. Now, what's the conclusion of this matter? Clearly then, if we look at Disney, we can see that today Disney is very religious, a very religious company, embracing religion in a huge way. Today they are committed to some specific religious elements, which can be plainly seen by the inclusion of these elements all over their films and parks. But while Disney is very religious, they are committed to nothing Christian. In fact, they are very much committed to that which is non-Christian, and even very much committed to that which is contradictory to Christianity. And this communicates Disney's values to those who view their films and attend their parks. So then, like a Trojan horse, Disney is presenting extremely religious elements in their films and amusement parks in such a way to normalize these elements, to approve of them, and to even promote them to those who are their consumers. Disney knows that they are doing this. And we can see that as they go out of their way to be sure viewers of Peter Pan don't think that they are doing this with tobacco and its usage, as they give a disclaimer, they give no disclaimer regarding the religions they are normalizing, approving of, or promoting. So what's the takeaway from all this? First, I'm not calling for a Disney boycott or any such thing as that, but I am calling for the Christian consumer to be very aware of what Disney is doing. I'm even calling for the non-Christian consumer to be very aware of what Disney is doing. Every consumer needs to be aware of what Disney's doing. Be sure that you yourself know what Disney is doing, and be sure that those with whom you watch Disney films are told by you what Disney is doing. Second, Christian, do not fall for the old claim that one's religious beliefs are so private and personal they should never be communicated to anyone else. Not only was this never the case in the past, it's not the case now. And it is not what Disney is doing whatsoever. Disney is communicating religious beliefs to millions of people every day. And so if you are a Christian, you should be very intentional about communicating your beliefs to others, as has been commanded. Third, we must be aware that what Disney has done has had a huge impact on our own culture at this point. I mentioned the Trojan horse previously, and this is no exaggeration, as hundreds of millions of people have viewed Disney content simply looking for entertainment, but leaving having become so desensitized to pagan religions. Because of this, American culture has changed, not merely becoming less Christian, but adopting values that were not part of Western civilization previously, not values upon which the West was built. And this makes it necessary to now defend ideas that were previously taken for granted. Now, I hope this content has been very helpful to you. Please be sure to visit TimotheusAcademy.com for links to more content. There is a place you can there directly sign up for the Timotheus Academy email circle. But please consider sharing this content widely in your own personal network as well. And I hope to see you again soon at Timotheus Academy.